Well, let's go back to 2013, and by this time the SNP had been running Scotland for 6 years, and it's been the SNP in charge ever since. Now we're going to compare 6 key measures of NHS performance on this graph. When something goes below this dotted line, it means it's better than in 2013. Anything above means things are worse than 2013, twice, 4 times, 6 times as bad, and so on. Now all our figures are averages for each year of monthly or quarterly stats. First, the outpatient waiting list. This blue line was growing even before the pandemic, but now it's twice as bad as a decade ago. The inpatient waiting list now is more than 2.5 times worse than 2013. Cancer referrals, patients waiting longer than the target time of 31 days between a decision to treat and the treatment actually starting. That's more than 3 times worse than 2013. And patients waiting more than 62 days between the first suspicion of cancer and treatment beginning is more than 7 times worse than 2013. Now back to outpatients. The number of patients on that blue list waiting more than 12 weeks for treatment is now 27 times worse than 2013. But look at the number of referrals waiting more than 12 weeks for inpatient care, even before the pandemic in 2019, already 30 times worse than it was in 2013. Now it is 125 times worse than it was a decade ago. Now, the Scottish Government told us the health and care system is under extreme pressure from the ongoing effects of winter, COVID, Brexit and inflation, and that it's increased investment for frontline NHS boards. How does this compare? Well, we don't often get comparisons within the UK because of differences in the data, but last week we brought you rare data from the Office for National Statistics showing that on one measure, they only looked at one, mind, Scotland's A&E departments performed better than England and Wales. And for that and our detailed look at each part of the UK, go to channel4.com/news. Jackie.
Kieran Jenkins. Well, how does all that affect people trying to access health services in Scotland? Our Scotland correspondent Catherine Sampson is in Edinburgh now. Catherine.
Well, look, Scotland may have avoided strike action from doctors and nurses, but clearly has not avoided long-term pressures on the NHS. Now, one area which maybe doesn't have the profile of those long A&E or cancer wait times is provision for mental health for children and young people. New figures out this morning suggest a slight improvement in waiting times, but it's a postcode lottery, and the Scottish Government has never met its own target set before the pandemic that 90% should be seen within 18 weeks of referral. We've been speaking to some who feel let down by the system.
He was just a really, really nice boy. He was cheeky and stuff like that, just like a normal boy, but he was really respectful and lovely.
In the blue corner, Scott Martin.
Samantha's son Scott had a promising future as a young boxer. But behind the smiles, Scott was fighting serious mental health issues throughout his teenage years.
When he was 15, all of a sudden, it would be like he was getting overwhelmed. And he would start crying. He would just break down for no reason. And then one night he done it when we were out, and I came down the road with him, and that's when he told me that he had been self-harming and that he had tried to take his life before. So that's really the point where it became really apparent, and that's the point we went to the doctors.
In April 2020, Scott was referred to CAMHS, an NHS service that helps children and young people with mental health. He was put on a waiting list.
Just a few months after that, we had another suicide attempt, and I contacted them again and said, this really needs to be rushed through. I felt like he was in danger.
The Scottish Government target is that 90% of children and young people should start treatment within 18 weeks of referral. It was 6 months before Scott started receiving phone calls for support. 8 months before he got his first face-to-face meeting.
The guy had said to him, "How are you feeling within yourself, Scott?" And he said, "Oh, I feel all right, but I still think that people can read my thoughts if I make eye contact with them." And then he wrote underneath it, "See him again in 4 weeks."
9 days after that appointment, Scott took his own life.
Sorry. The police chapped our door. He had been out with his friends. Somebody had found him on New Year's Day.
Sam believes if Scott had received help sooner, it would have made a difference.
He was open, he was honest, he told them how he was feeling, that he was scared. I was telling him that he was deteriorating, and it still wasn't enough to get him help.
These are the last photos Sam has of her son. To support others who found themselves waiting for help from the NHS, she set up a foundation in his memory. Based in her community in Falkirk, it runs on donations, and Sam says it links young people with local therapists much faster.
Coming here has been a lifesaver. From personal experience, being a teenager, you know, in this sort of day and age, it's hard.
Morgan is 19. Her struggles with mental health started when she was 12.
I was crying, I was breaking down. I had a lot of issues, you know, getting out of bed because I had anxiety, but I wasn't diagnosed with it. And even going to school, speaking to friends, I couldn't do that. I felt like I was letting people down.
Morgan says she struggled to get help from the NHS. On one occasion, she says she waited 2 years before realising something had gone wrong.
Phoned them up because I was desperate to get help and basically just got no further ahead. Then my mum phoned up and they basically said that I'd had no referral. So I was allegedly on a waiting list for a while, and it turns out whoever it was that was supposed to put that referral ahead didn't put that referral ahead, so I was just waiting for nothing.
Do you feel you've been failed by the system?
Yeah, I cannot express that enough. I've massively been failed by the system, yeah, massively.
Psychiatrists speak of increased demand and gaps in the workforce.
Mental health in Scotland has been in chronic crisis, probably even since before COVID and the lockdown. But we're now seeing a very acute episode where I think we're almost in a precarious position and the whole thing could come tumbling down.
In December, the Scottish Government cut nearly £30 million from the mental health budget.
My indignation and sorrow is that we were disproportionately cut. And this at a time when we have a lot of very idealistic talk about investing in the young people of Scotland, recognition that the education services, the universities are all seeing unprecedented mental health problems, and that in that climate we should be proportionately further cut, feels absolutely tragic.
The Scottish Government says it's doubled investment in mental health services since 2020 and is committed to helping all NHS boards reach the 18-week treatment target. Do you think it's fair to say there's a crisis in mental health in Scotland?
Yeah, 100% there's a crisis in mental health in Scotland. Something needs to happen. You know, people need to really step up and realise that it's a serious, serious situation, and if something isn't done about it, then people are just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse.
There needs to be more support, you know, and it's good that obviously we're here and there's other charities that's there, but I don't think it shouldn't be our place. As grieving families, it shouldn't be our place. The government should be doing this. How many people have got to die by suicide before they actually sit up and take responsibility? How many people have got
We
to
put
die?
these claims to Scotland's new Health Secretary, Neil Gray. Do you accept there is a crisis in mental health provision and too many young people are being failed by the system?
I accept that there are far too many people that are waiting too long, that have been waiting too long for mental health support. And I'm conscious of the fact that this will be no solace to those people who have waited for too long. But the investments that we're making are starting to make a difference. In CAMS, for instance, for child and mental health, adolescent mental health support services, those waiting lists coming down substantially. Since 2020-2021, we've doubled our investment in mental health spending between Scottish Government and regional boards. That's taken our spending levels to 1.3 billion.
And does that, just so I can be clear, does that include the 30 million cut?
Yes.
I just wonder what message, though, you feel that cut sent to people working in those professions, what message that sends to parents worried about their young people, that you were prepared to make that cut in the December budget.
Overall, the investment that we're making in health is up.
Does Scotland have a two-tier system in its NHS at the moment? Is it the case that people who can afford to simply pay to go private because they're so fed up with waiting lists.
That's not what I want to see.
But do you accept that is the case at the moment?
No, I think there are people who make that choice. I don't want them to be in a position where they have to make that choice. It's where, in England at the moment, you've got a situation where many trusts offer that provision to be able to pay in order to get their treatment happening faster. I don't want that situation in Scotland.
Have you had any discussions with NHS bosses about making the wealthy pay for treatment?
No, that's not what I'm looking to do. That's a red line for me in terms of the reforms that we're looking to bring forward.
I think some of them might be looking for that, though.
Well, I've heard some of that representation. In terms of the reforms that I'm looking to bring forward, I'm happy to consider almost anything that experts, patients, trade unions, staff think would make a difference. I'm pragmatic on that, but my red line is that the NHS must continue to be publicly owned and it must continue to deliver free at the point of need.
There's been a fairly chaotic turnover of health secretaries in the past few years. What can you achieve that your predecessors couldn't?
I'm inheriting a health service that is in recovery. There are undeniable challenges. People are waiting too long.
Is that a euphemism for in a
No, it's not. No, it's not. The majority of people that interact with our health service have a good and positive experience, right? And I think that needs to be underlined. Of course, for too many people, it isn't. And that is what I want to try to overcome. I don't want a situation where people are having to wait too long in accident emergency or waiting longer than is necessary on an operation. That is not where we want to be. And for those people that are, I apologise, because I want a health service that meets the needs of people when they need it. And that is what I will be focused on doing my best to achieve.